Let's speak now with Dr. Nader Hashimi, Associate Professor of Middle East and Islamic Politics at Georgetown University. Professor, thank you very much for your time. Firstly, let's start with the stalemate and ceasefire talks. What are the key sticking points for Hamas regarding this proposal? And do you think there is realistic prospect of Hamas agreeing to the terms laid out by the U.S.?
Well, look, it's important for your viewers to know that the day before Donald Trump was inaugurated as president, so on January the 19th, a ceasefire for hostage deal was negotiated and was signed by the two relevant parties, with backing from the international community. Israel has just announced that it's not going to honor that deal. It's not going to honor phase 2 of the deal, which required Israel to start the process of withdrawing its troops from Gaza in exchange for a release of the remaining hostages. That's the problem here. There was an agreement in place. Everyone signed onto it. And now Israel has decided not to honor the agreement. And unfortunately, the United States and the European Union and other Western countries are backing the Israeli violation of this agreement. And I would also point to the fact that within Israel, it's actually the family of the hostages, if you listen to what they have to say, who are blaming the Israeli government for this crisis and the suspension of the ceasefire deal that was in place. So that's how I view it.
Professor, I do want to clarify one point here, because despite what you say about January 19th, apparently this proposal is Steve Witkoff's idea. I mean, he's the America's Middle East envoy. So I mean, what's thinking here? I mean, is it Witkoff realizing that both sides need more time to get talking about phase 2, or has the Trump administration's thinking about Gaza evolved since the time the U.S. president was talking about moving Palestinians out of the Strip?
Well, first of all, just to be clear, Steve Witkoff is Donald Trump's special envoy, but he was implementing a ceasefire deal that had been negotiated back in May of last year by the Biden administration. It just wasn't implemented or enforced because the Biden administration didn't want to do what Donald Trump did to sort of pressure Israel a little bit to honor the deal. I think what's changed now is that Netanyahu knows that if he moves to phase 2 of this deal, which he signed on to, and he starts to honor that deal, the right-wing members of his coalition government will quit. That would force new elections in Israel, and most likely Netanyahu would lose those elections, and he would face, he'd have to go to court because he has these outstanding corruption cases. So I think that's what's going on. Unfortunately, the Trump administration and the special U.S. envoy seems to be backing the Israeli violation of the agreement. And that's the only way things can continue along the path that they were supposed to continue. So that's the key sticking point. And I suspect the reason why the United States and Steve Witkoff are backing the Israeli position now on this issue is because they're very much in Israel's camp. It's very wrong to sort of believe that somehow the United States is an honest broker. Everyone in Donald Trump's inner circle is a pro-Israel hawk, including Steve Witkoff, if you know his background. So that's why I'm very worried about where this is all headed. I think it's going to lead to a resumption of the war. It's going to lead to the refusal of Hamas to free the remaining hostages. And of course, it's going to lead to the colossal suffering of the Palestinians, which are already at historic levels here. That's gonna continue, and we don't know how it's all going to end. So I think this is a critical moment, and I think a lot of the blame for this particular crisis that we're talking about can be laid at the doorstep of the Trump administration, which refuses to press Israel to sign onto not to sign onto, but to honor an agreement that they had already signed.
I just want to go back to the point you were making earlier about the pressure on Netanyahu. It seems that the only option really is for him to return to fighting, resuming the Gaza war, if you like. I mean, are there options available that would satisfy him? as well as his far-right partners to avoid going back to war in Gaza?
I think you're correct.
Yeah.
I think you're correct. I think politically, restarting the war in Gaza helps Netanyahu politically because it keeps his coalition together. The big unknown here is whether he'll face outside pressure from the United States. There was pressure in the lead up to the inauguration of the new president. Trump didn't want to have, his inauguration clouded or affected by mass suffering in Gaza. So he pressured Israel to do what Joe Biden was unwilling to do, get them to honor a ceasefire agreement that was negotiated, back in May. Now we're at a different moment. Now we're sort of, I think, almost 2 months into, or at least a month and a half into this new presidency. And Donald Trump does not need, I think, these images from Gaza to sort of allow him to pursue his political program. That's old news now. So I suspect what's going to happen is that Netanyahu, because he's not going to face any pressure from the Americans this time around, is going to do what he has always wanted to do, and that's to continue this war without any end, because the longer the war continues, the longer he can stay in power. And he can say that, look, Hamas is still there. We have to fight them. They haven't been defeated. And so that's how, unfortunately, this is going to play out. And the consequences of this, of course, for the Palestinians in Gaza is horrific, because they're already suffering under brutal conditions. At least 50,000 Palestinians, most of them women and children, have been killed. The actual figure is reported to be much higher than that. And this is going to simply perpetuate their colossal suffering, and it's unclear how it'll all end.
Yeah, perhaps no pressure from the U.S., but how about the Arab countries? We know that Arab League summit is to happen in a couple of days' time. What do you expect to transpire from there? I mean, could that help sort of get the original plans back on track?
Theoretically, yes. Like, if there was any sort of credible Arab leadership in the Middle East that is willing to really, take a firm stand in defense of the human rights of the Palestinians, then the, Arab states do have a lot of leverage. They have a lot of leverage over Israel because, many of them have diplomatic relations. And it's noteworthy that not one Arab state that has diplomatic relations with Israel has decided to sever those relations in the context of this horrific situation in Gaza, which is, accurately described as a case of genocide by Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. So if the Arab states wanted to, change the equation here and pressure Israel, they could withdraw their ambassadors. They could threaten to sever relations. They could, do things along those lines that would send a message to Netanyahu and to his biggest supporter in Washington, D.C., that there are consequences for this type of behavior by the state of Israel. They're not willing to do that because all of these Arab states, as your listeners and viewers should know, they're authoritarian regimes. They very much want to, maintain a security relationship with the West, with the United States, and with Israel. But they're also under severe pressure from their own populations, who are outraged over the suffering of the Palestinians and the refusal of Arab states to really do anything of substance to end this horror show in Gaza. So yes, there's going to be an Arab League summit. I think this issue is going to be high on the agenda, but I'm not holding my breath that the Arab states are going to, do what's needed here to change the reality on the ground in Gaza and move things in a positive direction.
All right, Professor Hashemi, thank you so much for your time. Always good to have you on the show. Dr. Nadia Hashemi is Associate Professor of Middle East and Islamic Politics at Georgetown University.